Hey everybody, everything new under the sun here. I am actually testing out Camtasia. I wanna talk to you about my backup solution for my MacBook, my 2008 MacBook Pro, early 2008. But I just happened to try Camtasia, so I'm actually doing a live test of Camtasia, doing a screen capture and the webcam recording, obviously. So let's just start and kind of kill two birds with one stone. I'm trying to test out the Camtasia here. Just download it. It's a free trial. So what I have for my backup, currently I have a 2008 early MacBook Pro laptop, of course, and I just did a video of me putting an extra Ultra Bay drive bay in there, and an extra one, putting in an Ultra Bay drive bay, and it allows you to expand the drive capacity of your system, obviously. So I've got my 256 gig SSD in there, and then with the Ultra Bay, and I'll bring up the storage here. With the Ultra Bay, I put in another 500 gig drive here. So you see the Mac, this is my main drive, my SSD, and the data, this is my 500 gig data drive, which has iPhoto albums and iTunes on it. My iPhoto albums is 300 gigs or something like that. So my total capacity that I potentially need to back up is near 750 gigs. Obviously if you add those two up. This bottom one here is a USB drive, so I'm not including that, and I don't back up my USB drive there. That's just a temporary thing. I'm doing some transfer of some data here. So I cut it there. So let's get back to where I was. So I was basically saying that this bottom one isn't including in the backup that I'm doing. So I've got about 750 gigabytes of data that I'm backing up. And like I said, I do have a Netgear Stora, and my Netgear Stora has two drives in it, and they're each a gig. And I have it in RAID 1 configuration, which means mirroring, which means even though I have 2 gigs worth of space in there based on just pure drive size, since I'm mirroring, I really only get 1 usable terabyte of space, and the data is duplicated on each one. So if I have a drive failure on one of them, the data is still good on the other one. And then what you do is you just slide the one out, stick in a brand new terabyte drive, nice clean empty drive, and stick it back in the slot, and the Stora will actually resynchronize the 2 drives. It will match them up again and mirror the data, copy the good data over to the new drive, and then you'll have 2 good drives full of your data. So that's kind of how the Netgear Stora works, and I've had this Netgear Stora for years and years. I don't remember when I bought it. I must have had it for 4 years now, and I still have the original 3.5-inch hard drives in there. They're big. Let's see if I can get a drive to show you. They are the big old, classic hardware, desktop drives. These are sturdy, heavy-duty units, and I have 3 of them. I have 3 1-terabyte drives, because what I do is I actually I take so I get it all mirrored, all the data backed up on 2 of them, and then I break the mirror, pull one out, and I set that aside up on a shelf, actually. So now I have 1 copy of my data up on a bookshelf, separate from everything, separate from EMP blasts or fires, whatever else may come that may destroy something in the Netgear Stora, or vice versa for that matter. So I have 1 drive that is separate and apart from Netgear Stora, and then my third 1-terabyte drive I stick back in there. It copies the data across, and then I have 2 drives in the Netgear Stora that are mirrored, that have the same data on them, of course. And then I effectively have 3 copies of my data. So if anything, if a monster truck were to come and run over my Netgear Stora, I would still have my extra hard drive sitting there that I could restore from. So I always have I like to keep all my data, especially the critical data, on my MacBook plus on my backup drive. So because if you just put it on your your backup drive, if you have a USB backup drive that's a single drive, and you lose that single drive, it's not really a backup. It's not really a copy. You only have one copy of that data, so that's not really good for any disaster. So I usually have a copy on my MacBook, a copy on the extra drive that I've taken out, and a copy each on the mirror on the Netgear Stora. So I have about 4 copies of all my data at all times. Generally, when I'm operating, and that's how I continue to operate. Now, sometimes when I have to transfer data or I get too much and I have to reset my time machine, which I'm doing now, I actually decide to wipe the time machine drive and clear some space and do a fresh time machine. Right now, I have 2 copies of all my data because I'm using. There's only one drive in Netgear Stora right now because I have my the second drive out that I had to back up to because I had a whole bunch of files I had to put over there, and of course my broken mirror drive is sitting with all my data on it, all my older data that I will duplicate again, but it's the older time machine backup, and this will become obsolete once I finish my new time machine. So what I want to show you was. I'm actually backing up Time Machine as it is right now. I'll pull up the Time Machine window. So you can see here with the Stora Time Machine, and I love Time Machine. It just works, for if you've got a Mac and you need to back stuff up, Time Machine just works. Now I have an extra little program in here actually, which I'll just talk about briefly. And let's see. I'm already on the preferences window. I have this Time Machine scheduler, and because what happens is Time Machine by default it backs up throughout the day. Every 15 minutes, every hour, whatever it is, it backs up every little thing that you're doing. But I don't like that. I like it to maybe back up once every 5 days because I don't have any data that I'm adding within 5 days. I'm not too concerned about if I lose it, and the chances of losing that are not high. So I get this Time Machine schedule. You can Google that and download it, and it just allows you to schedule the backup for a different time frame rather than backing up every single day all day long, which sucks up bandwidth and power and keeps your MacBook awake and stuff. You don't need that. So let me go back to so this is Time Machine preferences. So you can see I've got 1 terabyte of storage available here, 613 gigabytes left on that storage, and I have 630 gigabytes of data to back up because remember I said I have my 2 drives there. So I have just about, let's see if I can bring it up alongside here. I have when my drives are full, I'm going to have 750 gigabytes of data to back up. So it's a fair bit of data, and even for most people, that's not a lot of data these days, especially if you're doing movies and stuff. Because I toss a lot of the old video recordings that I do, so I don't keep all that. So I have a lot of data here, and so overall 630 gigs is where I'm at on my SSD and my internal 500 gigabyte hard drive. And you can see I've backed up about 335 gigabytes so far. Now I am going across gigabit Ethernet, although having said that, that is not as fast as you would think it would be. Now, for some reason, this isn't backing up. I want to show you the transfer speed, but it's not showing the transfer over the network. Oh, there we go. Okay, we started. So you see that 2.7 megabyte transfer there. It maxes out, I think, at about 9-10 megabytes, and it should be over that. Gigabit Ethernet should be well over that, nearing 100 megabytes. Not exactly, but you would think it would be going like 40-50 megabytes anyways a second, but it doesn't do that for whatever reason, so that's fine. But anyways, you can see it plugging away at 5 megs a second. It's bouncing up and down as it's looking for data to back up. I'm also rendering a video, so that's probably slowing it down. I'm rendering it in my Screencast-O-Matic Yeah, it looks like it's actually done. And that's screencast-o-matic was the partial reason why I'm actually looking at Camtasia for for some green screen effects, which I may or may not be able to do with that. But anyways, and that's part of the reason again why I'm trying out this software. So you can see that I have a fair bit of data here. Obviously, going back to my Stora. The next thing is because I'm so close, I have about another 50 gigs of 50-60 gigs of data that I don't consider critical that I back up alongside the time machine, and it doesn't exist on my MacBook. So to have a proper backup of that, I have to keep my Netgear Stora in mirror configuration. Otherwise, I don't have a true backup of it. I need data in two places to have a true backup of data. So that other 50 gigs just sits on the Netgear Stora, but sits on two different drives, a copy of each on each drive in the mirror. Now I could put my Netgear Stora into JBOD config, which is just a bunch of drives, which means I would have a total of 2 terabytes. Hopefully I haven't been saying gigabytes, but 2 terabytes of data with which to use as storage. However, there's no backup. There's no copy of it on my Stora itself. So I would need a copy on my MacBook and a copy on the Stora, and then I would have 2 terabytes of storage, which would be great. But like I said, I want to preserve the mirror on the Netgear Stora due to the extra data that I have on there that isn't too critical, but still I don't want to lose it. And the whole feature and functionality of the Stora is that you can do the RAID 1 configuration. So I really want to make use of that, and it's come in handy for sure in the past, especially when you think of the ability to break the mirror and then set a hard drive aside on the shelf or somewhere else in your house, or even outside of your house as a extra tertiary backup. For disaster recovery, that is certainly the best way to go. You can never have too many copies of your data in general. So that's what I'm doing with my data, and I would definitely suggest. Now there's new Storas out there, new versions of it, and there's even fancy ones. You go to Best Buy and you find some 4-bay robo backup units that do RAID RAID 5 or whatever, striped array across 3 disks, and you get a bit more space, and you have redundancy as well built in there. But those are really expensive. Like for this, just a plain mirror Netgear Stora, it cost me near $400. I think it was about $200 for the Stora itself. I think maybe it came with 1 drive, so maybe it was near $350. Another terabyte drive at the time, at least, was $100, and with tax, I mean that's what you'd pay now, anyways, for a terabyte by the end, $80 or whatever. So to get a whole unit, it's about $300 to get up and running with this sort of thing. To get some of those fancier units, the 3-bay, 4-bay, whatever 8-bay units, you're talking $500 to get the unit and to fill it with hard drives that you can use. So it's not cheap. So I'm trying to stretch out the life of this thing as much as I can, but obviously, I'm getting pretty close to my 1 terabyte limit. So I'm going to survive for now. We've went down to 1 MacBook in the house, so this the Stora unit is dedicated to my the Stora is dedicated to my MacBook Time Machine backups, and some other superfluous stuff, about 50 gigs, 60 gigs of random other storage. So for now it'll work, but as soon as this is 613 gigs now, once it starts backing up from over weeks and months, it will get copies and copies of older data, and that will build up and fill up the drive in a couple of months, just with historical data that I may not have on my MacBook now anymore, but it thinks that I may want to go back and find later. And since I do a lot of movies, videos for YouTube, obviously, there's a lot of videos that come and go that are very transient on my system, and so it backs up some of those every once in a while. I try to delete them before it does, but it does back up some of those, and I never want to see them again. And but that takes up space on my Time Machine backup, and that's one reason for starting your Time Machine backup over again, just to get a clean slate, get a fresh backup. As long as you know that there's likely not anything from really old that you want to keep, that you're going to need to keep in there. And for the most part, I know that I've never come across a situation where I thought, oh, a month ago I deleted something and I wish I had that back. In those cases, I shouldn't say that. I have had situations where that's come up, but all I've done is I've been able to go back in Time Machine, and it has served me well in those cases. But that's pretty rare. That's maybe once or twice that's happened. Usually, I make sure not to delete stuff that I think I may need, or I'll just put it on my extra storage on the Netgear and just let it sit there with the other 50 gigs of random storage stuff if I think I'm ever going to use it again. So that is my Netgear Stora Time Machine backup. I am getting close to having to get new drives in there, but I'm pushing it off. I'll probably go. Next step I'd like to make is maybe 2 3.5-inch drives with 3 terabytes each, and so mirrored I would have 3 terabytes. JBOD config I would have 6 terabytes. I think the 3 terabytes, I think that would do me for the next number of years, just like the 1 terabytes did. 4 years ago, they worked fine, and they will work fine for another year or so. But when I get the 3 terabyte drives, that'll do me for the next 5 or 8 years after that. Depending on what I'm doing, but in all likelihood, that will suffice. I find the more space you have, the more you fill it up with junk that you probably don't need to keep for long term, anyways. But that's beside the point. So that is the next move I'd like to make. You can get a 3 terabyte for $150 or something. So that's a $300 upgrade to get 2 drives. In my current system, I have 3 drives. That's ideal because then you can, like I say, you can break the mirror, take a drive off site, and still have 2 compatible drives in the Netgear Stora for a mirror config. So that's kind of the best scenario. But if I were to go to 3 terabyte drives, you're talking $450, near $500 with tax, and that's pretty expensive. Although what is the backup of all your 30 years worth of photos worth? Is it worth $500? Maybe it is. I had a friend who lost all his backups, and he took his corrupt drive to a company to get it fixed and to restore some of those photos. I think he spent like $1,000 or whatever it was, and he only got maybe 15% of the photos back from that one. So it's better in this case to be sure you have a good backup, and I'm always pretty sure that I have a pretty decent backup here in terms of having something completely separate on a shelf like the 1 extra drive. So anyways, that's what I do. I definitely recommend the Netgear Stora in mirror configuration. Get one of those. You don't have to get a fancy RAID box. Just your basic thing that will do mirroring. RAID 1 mirroring is what you want. And use Time Machine on your Mac. It's a no-brainer. And I would get the Time Machine scheduler as well. If it, for me, it's annoying. If you have an iMac or something that's just going all the time, probably doesn't matter, and just use it in the on position. Use its default stuff, and it just works. The Apple stuff just works, and I've had pretty much no problems with it. And I've been using it for many years. That's what I would suggest, and definitely have an offsite backup if you can. And spend the money on drives, because if you ever do have a disaster, a fire, or whatever, you'll be glad that you had good quality backups and multiple copies of those backups. Should one of the drives get overheated or burn out or whatever, get stomped on, who knows what's going to happen. So, all right, that is it, and hope you enjoyed it, and definitely recommend the Netgear Stora. And they do have new units of these, so check it out. And for me, it's worked flawlessly, and I would recommend it.